that our guest is today Kristen from BC SPCA, and we've had the pleasure of speaking with your colleague Erin on the topic of kind and professional certification, and we learned quite a bit during that interview as well. So for the viewers, that recording is available on our website as well as for today's. So for today's topic, we're going to be speaking on higher welfare foods, but before we get to that, we're going to ask Kristen a couple of questions about her role and herself at BC SPCA. And of course, reminder is that if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know whenever. So how are you today, Kristen?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about your role to begin with at the BC SPCA?
Yeah, so again, my name's Kristen Jakub. I'm the specialist of farm animal welfare. And so I'm part of the science and policy team, like Erin is, that you guys met previously. But my work is to improve the lives of farmed animals across the province. And I've been working in this role for 3 years now. So just to kind of give an overview of what my role does. So like Erin with wild animals, myself, I focus on farmed animals. So I work on the education and advocacy initiatives to improve farm animal welfare in BC. So we have a different department that focuses on the care of farm animals that are within our direct care. So those that are stray, abandoned, neglected, whatnot. But my work is on the animals that are outside of our direct care. So this includes animals that are raised on farms, commercial, and just other farm animals in general.
Oh, that's so cool. Could you tell us a little about your education background as well? And if there is, what is like a degree requirement for your role?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously having a background in animal welfare is beneficial for this role, but I can kind of give an overview of how I got here. So I'm from Ontario, and I attended the University of Guelph, and I did my undergrad in zoology. And then I'm sure like many of you, you want a career working with animals, but veterinary medicine may not be the route that you want to go. And so I found myself in that boat after graduation. I really wanted to work with animals, but I knew being a vet wasn't for me. And so that's what led me to pursue a master's degree in animal welfare and behavior, also at the University of Guelph. And after I did that, I was just working at the local animal shelter, and I came across the job posting for my current role at the SPCA. So I was lucky enough to get it and made the move to BC, and I have been loving it ever since. So sorry, I don't know if I mentioned.
Great to hear.
Yeah, it's been 3 years now.
Yeah, welcome to BC. Yeah, it's a lovely country. I mean, not country, province. Of course, there's a lot. But so what's the work culture like at BC SPCA?
Oh man, that's a good question. Honestly, I'm not biased, but it's great. I'm surrounded by such inspiring and smart and caring individuals, and it's a very collaborative work environment. We all work together with the one common goal in mind, which is to improve the lives of domestic, farmed, and wild animals in BC. And so for me, I immediately felt welcomed into the organization, and it's really been a rewarding workplace to be a part of.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's awesome. Do you know if there's any volunteering opportunities that people can apply for in while they're doing their undergraduate studies?
Yeah, there are a lot of volunteer opportunities, and it kind of spans a wide variety of areas. So it really depends what you're interested in doing, whether it's with, companion animals, dogs and cats. There are some farmed animal welfare volunteer opportunities. So for those that are interested, I'd encourage you guys to check out our website. We do have a volunteer tab there, and all of the information on different opportunities or how to apply, all that information can be found on our website. And so, yeah, I know students, it's a busy way of life, but volunteering is a great way to still kind of get that in and get some animal experience and different volunteer opportunities.
Awesome. That's great. I will link that into the description of the video recording as well for everyone that's interested.
Great.
And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know, but we're going to move on to the topic of today, the higher welfare foods. But thank you very much for the opportunity to get to know you. And now onto your expertise. Could you tell us a little bit about what higher welfare food means, and how is BC SPCA involved in that?
Yeah, so higher welfare food essentially just refers to any animal products, so meat, eggs, and dairy that are raised that are animals raised to higher standards of care. So in Canada, we have what are called the codes of practice. And basically what these are, they outline requirements that all farmers in Canada are expected to follow. And so these codes have minimum requirements, and they're designed to be they're designed to apply to all farms across Canada. So they have to be practical, but also balance animal welfare at the same time. And so when we refer to higher welfare, essentially what we're talking about is just animals that are raised to standards that go above and beyond what are included in these codes of practice. And then I guess just how we are involved in that. So as an animal welfare organization, we do advocate for improving the lives of farmed animals. And so for consumers that do choose to include animal products in their diet, we always recommend that they choose higher welfare products whenever possible, just to support a better life for farmed animals. That's our goal. We're continuously trying to raise the bar for animals that are raised on farms for our consumption.
Oh, that's great. So when we want to make these higher welfare food choices, how do we go about recognizing them? Say in like a grocery store, is there a label that we should look out for? How do we recognize it?
Yeah. So the easiest way to know that you're making a higher welfare food choice is to look for a higher welfare certification label. And so there are 3 programs that we recommend. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them or have heard of them before, but we have Animal Welfare Approved, Certified Humane, and Global Animal Partnership. So those are the 3 programs that we as an organization are comfortable recommending to consumers. And the reason being is that all 3 of those programs have dedicated standards to improve the lives of farm animals. So what they do is producers can apply through these programs, and depending on the species of animal that they raise, they can be certified under one of these programs. And so it's seeing that label, you know that these programs are raising their animals to higher standards of care. And then I should mention another certification label that is good to look for is the organic label. So that's kind of a more commonly seen label in grocery stores. And we do know that, you know, organic production is more so focused on the natural side of things, but their standards do actually include some animal welfare provisions, such as outdoor access, that do improve the lives of farm animals. So that's another label that we encourage people to look for, is the organic one.
Oh, okay. I never thought about organic in that sense, so that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Labels. Is there anything that's misleading that we should look out for as well?
Yeah. So that being said, there are unfortunately lots of labels that you can find on your food products that are essentially just ways to just like marketing ploys. They're trying to get you to buy their product and trying to cast it in a more positive light. And so I won't get into too much detail. There are a lot of labels that can be misleading, but some common ones that we see are food labels with the term natural on it. So you may see naturally raised, naturally produced, all natural. That's one of a common, that's a common label that we see that can be misleading. And the reason behind that is that when you see that natural label, you may believe that, oh, this animal was raised outdoors as it would naturally. But in reality, under our Canadian food labeling regulations, the term natural actually has nothing to do with how the animal was raised. So if you see that natural label on a food product, it actually just refers to the product itself after processing. So it just means that it doesn't include any added vitamins, minerals, food coloring, any sort of additives like that. So doesn't have anything to do with animal welfare. So that's one that you can look out for. Another common one that we see is any sort of antibiotic claim. So you may see raised without antibiotics or antibiotic free. And so a lot of the times people will see this label and think, oh, hey, this animal was raised extremely well on this farm, so well that it never got sick and it remained healthy throughout its life and it didn't need to be treated with antibiotics. But this actually isn't the case. And so while the label does mean that the animals were never given any antibiotics, it doesn't mean that the animals never got sick. And so the reality is the animal may have gotten sick, but weren't given antibiotics as treatment to get well again. And so it's important, obviously, to use antibiotics only when needed, but we do obviously believe that sick animals deserve treatment and they shouldn't be left to suffer from their illness. And so when you see antibiotic free, it doesn't actually guarantee any sort of animal welfare improvements. And also just note on that, the antibiotic claim is also misleading because by law, all of our food must be free of antibiotics before it enters the supply chain.
Okay, so that's like kind of a redundant claim, if anything, for marketing, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, these things are something that, I never knew personally before going into this. So is there anything else that we can do to further our education on higher welfare foods in our everyday lives? Something that's easy access for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are lots of kind of avenues that you can take, but a great way that we recommend to people to really know where their food comes from, how the animals were raised, is to shop your local farmers market. So this is great in that you're getting food that is locally produced, but also it gives you the opportunity to speak directly with maybe even the farmers themselves and ask questions. So you can ask them about, how they raise their animals. You may even be able to go see the farm. They may have pictures available or have a website where you can go do further looking. So that's kind of one way that you can educate yourself on higher welfare foods. Another way, this is a little plug, but we have a Farm Sense newsletter. And yeah, so it's an e-newsletter that you can subscribe to online on our website. And I put it together. It goes out 4 times a year. And we discuss a lot of higher welfare food topics, a lot of kind of myth busting for certain labels. So again, going back to like those misleading labels and knowing what to look out for, and just various other topics that help you learn about where your food comes from, but then also how you can make higher welfare food choices. I always recommend too an easy starting point if these certification labels aren't readily available in your grocery stores. A lot of the times they're found, at least in BC, they're commonly found in specialty stores such as, Whole Foods or Choices Market. But you can look kind of for the next best. So if certified labels aren't available, organic is normally more readily available and more visible. So that's a good option. But then also just looking for kind of those secondary next best labels. So free range is a good label that you can look for, basically meaning that the animals were able to go outside and have outdoor access. It's very common for laying hens. Often there are lots of options in the grocery store. And so that's a product, if you are somebody that chooses to consume eggs in your diet, looking for cage eggs is a great starting point, whether that has the free range label or the cage free label. Again, the best is to look for a certified program certification, but if you can't find those, looking for the next best is a good option as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for letting us know about the newsletter. I'll definitely let everyone know about that as well. So speaking of farmers as well, is that something in part of our coursework in second year is called LFS 250 and touches very heavily on dairy cow welfare. So how would one of these like third-party certification programs be involved on a dairy farm?
Yeah, so these third-party certification programs that I mentioned, the Animal Welfare Approved, Certified Humane, and Global Animal Partnership. All of those can have a very large impact on a dairy farm, or just, again, farms in general. But specifically for dairy cattle, essentially with these programs, they dictate how the farmer is raising their dairy cows. And so there are standards relating to you know, a wide array of, or all aspects essentially of a dairy cow's life. So they have standards that relate to, you know, things such as feed and water requirements, housing requirements, health management, pasture access, and some of these programs even extend into transport and slaughter. And so these programs can significantly improve the lives of dairy cattle on farms. Another great thing with these programs is that they all are independently inspected. So an independent assessor will go out to these dairy farms and ensure that the standards that they say they're meeting are actually being met. And so if you were to kind of compare a conventional dairy farm with a farm certified under one of these certification programs, you would see some major welfare improvements. So for example, the cows would have outdoor access under these programs. They would have more indoor space and opportunities for socialization. And another kind of big welfare issue in dairy farming, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, but are the tie stall housing systems. So in these housing systems, the cows are tied individually to stalls, and so they don't have the freedom to move about and exercise and socialize with one another and get that enrichment that is so critical to achieving, you know, their natural behaviors. And so under these certification programs, these tie stall housing systems are prohibited. So you know that they aren't being housed in any sort of confinement that, again, limits the expression of these natural behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know how often they go back to check on that? Like, is it like a yearly or?
Yeah, so each of these programs, they have different requirements for the inspection process, but most of them are within a 12 to 15 month inspection cycle. And one of the reasons they stagger it instead of doing 12 months, but some, I can't remember exactly which program it is, but one of them does a 15-month inspection cycle. And this is to ensure that the farms are being visited through each season. Because we know in Canada, the weather can change, and, you know, winter can bring about different challenges than the summertime. And so by staggering these inspections, you ensure that they're being inspected through all of the seasons.
Wow, that's very considerate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's a good point. So to wrap things up, my last question for you is, I read on the BC SPCA website about Humane Canada and representing animal welfare in the development of codes and practices. Could you tell us like a general like rundown of how that takes place and how long it takes for change to take?
So the BC SPCA is a member of Humane Canada, and Humane Canada is the largest animal welfare organization in the country. And so because our SPCA staff have farm animal welfare expertise, we're sometimes asked by Humane Canada to represent them and speak for animals in the Code Development Committee. So so these codes of practice, essentially, they should be reviewed every 5 years and updated at least every 10 years to ensure that it's in line with new government regulations, changing societal views, new industry practices, or scientific research that has come out. And so when a code's been identified as needing an update, like for example, the dairy code actually was recently updated and it will be released shortly. But once a code has been identified as needing an update, they will have representatives from various stakeholders to create new standards in this code. And so when we are asked by Humane Canada to represent animal welfare in this process, we essentially are advocating for improvements to animal welfare and all aspects of these codes. And so change, it does take time to, you know, from the time when a code is identified as needing an update and then to the time when it's actually published. But that being said, it could take anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 years from start to finish. And again, yeah, that it does sound like a long time, but again, these codes represent the standards that farmers across Canada should be following. And so the impact that an updated code has is huge. Millions of farm animals will benefit from these updated standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking on that. Yeah, so we're kind of coming down to the end of our interview today, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's really important for us to see what goes on behind the scenes and also the representative of the people that work on behind the scenes. Because for me, I always thought of BC SPCA as an organization rather than a group of people that works on animal welfare issues. So with that said, everything we talked about today, including the newsletter, will be included in the description of this video, so make sure you check those out. And thank you so much for joining us today, Kristen.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you. Take care.